The road to hell is paved with good intentions. What is a real-life example of this?
A man named Dr. Spock wrote a handbook for child rearing. It was widely circulated and well received. Many of our parents likely got their child rearing advice from this book. In it, he recognized that babies throw up a lot and therefore recommended newborns be laid on their stomachs to sleep. Unknowingly, this would result in the accidental smothering deaths of thousands of newborns. A huge number of SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, cases can be laid at his feet. To this day, the Back to Sleep campaign is still fighting to update parents on what we now know. Newborns should sleep on their backs until they can reliably roll over for themselves. My mom woke up in an absolute panic, having no idea why. She ran to check on my brother, who was a newborn at the time. He was face down, drowning in his vomit. I feel so sorry for every parent who lost their child that way, because my mom would have never recovered. Lobotomy. Surgery to fix the mentally unwell. It sounds so good. No more reliance on medication. You're good from now on. But it didn't work. The outcomes were awful, and it was frequently done without any sort of consent. It all could have been shut down fairly quickly if people were honest about what was happening. But careers and money was at stake, so many unnecessarily suffered. Several years ago, I heard a case from the 50s or so where a young boy was lobotomized for his poor behavior. 7 years old, lobotomized for being forgetful and reading late at night. There is a memoir written by a guy who had a lobotomy as a child called My Lobotomy, definitely worth reading. Since the abysmal performance of American schools has been in the news recently, No Child Left Behind and its replacement, Every Student Succeeds Act. America has never had really good public education, but it used to be serviceable. NCLB came in to try and create some milestones and accountability. Instead, it made the problem worse. ECSS came in and tried to address its problems, but changed the stuff that wasn't the problem and left the bad parts unscathed. Taken altogether, 57% of high school graduates can't read at a 7th grade reading level, and over a quarter are functionally illiterate. Oh man, this really resonates with me. My brother taught middle school history in a very low-income area in the South. This comment could be a post of its own about what's wrong with low-income area schools, but I just want to relate one thing that always baffled me. Hardly any of the kids could read. You read that right. 12 and 13-year-old kids couldn't read and could hardly spell their names. On top of that, there were behavioral problems that went completely unchecked. These kids were just allowed to do whatever they wanted. They'd repeat the mandatory grade, and then they'd be passed along to be the next teacher's problem. My brother didn't teach any history those few years. Instead, his job was to teach them how to read and to stop them from fighting and selling each other pot. It sounds unbelievable, I know, but the apathy that NCLB caused created this giant behavioral problem and is actively setting back these low-income communities. These kids are doomed from the start, and nobody cares. The people who try to help are quickly burnt out due to the complete lack of support and cronyism that forms in the school system. I love this country, but our public school systems are a huge train wreck. The invention of social media. When Tom was working at Friendster, I genuinely believe he wanted to build something that allowed people to socialize and communicate in a new and modern way. On paper, early MySpace is a brilliant concept that made a lot of people realize the potential of the internet. This concept was that mutilated and turned into what social media is today. Quite possibly the single most socially damaging invention that ever happened. Far away from bringing people closer together, it has turned into a tool that is tearing people further apart, making them feel more disconnected with society than ever, and instead of democratizing discussion, it has put even more power into the hands of the elite. The introduction of non-native species as a means of solving an environmental problem. Hawaii resident here. It's been the bane of our existence. Invasive species goes all the way back to Polynesians. They brought pigs and chickens for food. They cause all sorts of problems now that they are wild. We also have mongoose. Rats were decimating the local bird population. So the government released mongoose to handle the problem. However, mongoose are diurnal and rats are nocturnal. So instead of going after the rats, they went after the birds, cats. Brought as pets, now they are an ecological menace. They love eating the local birds. See a pattern? I went to the Galapagos and noticed all the street cats were extremely skittish. The reason why didn't click with me until a guide explained how challenging it is to preserve the delicate ecosystem on the islands with the import of pets and livestock. Don't get me wrong, I love cats. But they can spell devastation for local bird and rodent populations. Gotta do what you gotta do, which in this case is sadly extermination until people stop trying to bring them over.